The Flash, issue 5, legacy number 805. This is Cy Spurrier and Mike Diodato Jr. I feel like this book is very good at throwing too many details at me, so that there's always at least a few things that I'm not entirely... Like, I get it in the moment when I'm reading it, but if I try and describe them now in hindsight, I'm going to struggle.
It's like a dream, where you're like, did I read that? Did that come to me in a... It's very weird that way.
The main focus of this... So the main character of this issue is Jay, right? Wally's son.
Yep.
And it's him in school, and it's exploring his powers, which introduces... I'm not sure if this is entirely new, but he kind of like splits up into little like blood men.
Yeah, they meet men.
Well, it was making me think of all things, there's a really crappy vampire movie from the early 90s called Subspecies, where the vampire's blood makes these little blood goblins that can do stuff for him.
Is that where Radu comes from?
That's where Radu comes from, yeah.
Gotcha, all right.
Radu's the one who has the blood.
Thanks to Tim, I am aware of Radu. So thank you, bud.
Yeah, so basically Jay, one of his powers is that he can sort of like teleport to another speedster, and that happens throughout this issue. We see him sort of go towards Wally, and Wally's helping Mr. Terrific and co with the science experiment. We see him go to some of the others and bounce back, and we get sort of his thoughts. But the main thing is that he is interacting with this other character who knows a lot about his powers. And I'm just trying to get to the page with his name. Here we go. Inspector Pilgrim, who is a science detective, and he's got this big bowl hat, is what I'm going to... It's like he's got a big bowl on his head.
You can't even see it. You can't see him. It looks like a lampshade almost.
Which I think is intentional. I think...
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to turn out to be someone that we know who isn't just called Pilgrim. Although maybe there's a hint in the name. I'm not sure. I'm not recognizing something.
So I thought the only Pilgrim that comes to mind is I could have sworn there was a Flash character with the last name Pilgrim. But then I remembered, I think that was the Pilgrim that I remember is from the Bendis book Powers, which has nothing to do with Flash.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking literally it'd be someone else with that same name. I was thinking it's just like a hint, in terms of like what the word means or something like that.
Right.
But regardless, it's he clearly knows stuff from the future, right? As he's talking to Jay. But the big thing with Jay here is kind of him. It's kind of like a soul searching issue for Jay, where he's looking at all the other speedsters. He's seeing how special his sister is. He's seeing how special Barry and Wally are, and even talking about how he's not really jealous of his new baby sister.
Of Wade.
Or brother, I should say.
Yeah.
But he's feeling a little alienated because he's now the middle kid. Well, they're twins, so they're not really middle, but you know what I mean.
But he does have middle child syndrome because he's feeling like he doesn't know what his place is in the family, right? Because he doesn't have Speed Force powers per se, like Irie does.
Yeah.
And
that's something he talks about a lot in the issue, is that he's connected to the Speed Force, but in a way that's different from everyone else. He can't just run through it, but as Inspector Pilgrim tells him, no, you don't attach to the Speed Force in a linear fashion like everyone else does. You kind of manipulate it. In fact, the aliens, the light aliens that we see again when the science project goes kablooey, they call him a shaper. Oh, there's a shaper here, which is kind of suggesting that he can manipulate reality in a way that's very important, and maybe that's going to be a big deal. In fact,
or the Speed Force in of itself.
I say maybe. Obviously, it's going to be a big deal in this run because Spurrier's seeding it here, so obviously it is. But it feels like they're setting something big up for Jay here, which is interesting. But the real big thing about this issue though is him thinking about his place, and the issue's called Top Priority. And it's a phrase that's thrown around a little bit. Wally says it to Bart when he's worried about Max and him being trapped in this other dimension. And then when Jay talks to Wally and Wally tries to reassure him, he calls him his top priority, and then his narration says, yeah, me and everyone else. And it's kind of getting to the heart that he doesn't feel like he is like top priority, right? That's the point, is he doesn't feel like it's his dad's sole concern. So... it all builds up to at the end to him telling his dad that he doesn't want to be a superhero, right? Yeah. Now, admittedly, he's young enough; he can change his mind. But it does feel it's definitely played like it hits Wally hard when he says this to him,
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's not even like there's any dialogue. It's just the art. The art does a great job here, where Wally's face is kind of in shadow, and it looks like he's. I wouldn't say disappointed, but certainly
he's solemn for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So
and I like the opposite of that. It's next to it, but it's Inspector Pilgrim and Jay back on the school bench, and Jay's clearly crying, and Pilgrim's looking so uncomfortable. You know.
Is it possible this is just older Jay?
Yeah, maybe.
Because he knows a lot about Jay. He keeps hinting at it. So.
Yeah. And apparently, so I looked up this Inspector Pilgrim, and on the wiki article, and granted, wikis can be whatever, they say that the first actual appearance is him as the inspector in issue 1 of this run. So.
Oh, okay.
So this is something that's been seeded, which is nice.
Interesting. Yeah, because I mean, obviously, I've glossed over some of the big actiony moments, like I said, the science experiment that Wally's doing with Mr. Terrific and the scientists. The what they call the stillness, that's what they're called.
Yeah.
The sort of the different colored alien, and I say alien, interdimensional aliens specifically, show up, and they call Jay a shaper, like I said. Yeah. But they also like start reacting when they see him. They kind of make him split up into those little blood men that we were talking about. And Wally basically is about to go supernova with the Speed Force. Like he's vibrating, he's collecting Speed Force energy. It's like he's about to shatter the world, and that's something Jay brings up later, is that Wally would have went supernova to get him back, and it's only because Jay reformed and said, "No, I'm fine. Like I'm good. Like it's just a thing I can do."
Yeah. But I do like that, because that does drive point the home with him. Is like, even though he didn't want to be a hero and stuff, his dad's operating from a spot of, his kids, his family do mean the world to him, and that extends to the Flash family. And I think Jay is Spurrier uses Jay as that, anchor point here. And I figure that's how he's going to be, because Jay he can touch the Speed Force from different angles, right, than what we're used to. And I feel like him being representative of that, not having the Speed Force powers, being so different, not wanting to follow in the family footsteps, I figured that's going to be Wally's kind of reminder of why he does all of this. And I mean, I might just be, taking more from the story, but that's what I got out of the story at the end, where he would have shattered the world for me. And it was just a very nice sentiment in this very kind of weird science fiction-y superhero book.
It's interesting, because this book as a whole has definitely had, you used the word solemn earlier, and I think solemn kind of describes the tone of this Flash run so far, and I kind of like it because it's different from what Flash usually feels like. So I've been kind of digging that. I'm also loving that it is giving more time to the kids. Like, this was a very J-focused issue, obviously. Iris had a bit of focus before, and I expect that both kids are going to get a lot of focus as time goes on, particularly the relationship with Wally. The run so far, its biggest sin is that it's got all this sciencey stuff going on. That it does feel like it hits you with it so quickly and so fast at points that, like, I don't remember the exact context the first time the stillness showed up, because there was so many things being thrown at me in issue 1 and 2 that I feel like I have to go back and read it again.
There were Speed Force gorillas and someone running around, and then they're there, and I was like, this is a lot to take in.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, but I'm really loving the art. I think the moodiness of it, and like you say, the reactions on the faces are doing a lot of heavy lifting. That page where Wally is going supernova and collecting Speed Force energy looks gorgeous. There's a lot of great pages like that. It's not up there with some of the best artists or some of my favorite artists, just because it's not 100% consistent. But when it's on, it's really on, and the overall aesthetic is very, very nice. So really appreciated that. There's a whole scene with Grodd that we should probably mention a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the first time Jay jumps. Pretty much, he jumps. Well, second time I should say. He jumps to, basically, Wally is trying to talk to Grodd and get some information about what the other gorillas were doing, because there's been like an uprising. It gets in a little bit to like what Grodd and some of the other apes' beliefs are. Like, they've got what was the name of the thing?
He says here because he attacks Wally.
I've got the word. It's the Miengu.
Yeah.
The Miengu prophesied that I would break my enemy's heart before devouring it, and he kind of, because he basically Grodd senses that Jay's there on the other side of the glass before Wally knows he's there, and starts making these sort of vague sort of threats about him.
Yep, and so he's the slaughter of the sun would be apt, and to where Jay starts messing with all these dials in this room, not dials but like instruments, and that what does this end up doing? Because that ends up helping them, get Grodd back under control, kind of buying time.
Yeah, what he does is. Well, what he does is he turns on the microphone. He's not just playing with random things.
That's what he does.
Yeah. He turns on the microphone and calls through and asks Grodd why he does what he does. And Grodd basically calms down and says, in all these years of fighting the Flash and other heroes, no one's ever actually just asked me that. And then he goes into explain it a little bit.
And that's what I wanted to get to. That's what the part I was getting to that got me distracted was he calls himself by his real name, which I don't think I've ever heard Grodd refer to himself as that, as Mwenye. He's the father of the professor. He's a silverback. So basically it runs a parallel with Wally, that why Wally does everything he does is for his family. In this other twisted way, so does Grodd, right? He's trying to do what's best for his troop.
Yeah, but Grodd describes it, though, as being a slave to his family, where it's this constant burden to actually do everything for them and be the best for them. And I think that ties into what Wally's story is, because the whole thing we had the last couple of issues was that Wally was escaping reality and going to that Flash garden where he was effectively just ignoring the world and like getting away from it, almost like a coping mechanism, an unhealthy one at that, because it seems like he was sort of getting lost in it until someone snapped him out of it. So there's definitely some parallel. I mean, I think thematically this conversation with Grodd does have a lot to lend to the main story with Wally. So so now that seemed like a scene that we should have talk about a bit before we wrap up, because I feel like a big deal. So I mean, it's the sort of thing where there's these rough edges to this run constantly, but it's always doing something interesting, and I'm always kind of intrigued by what it is doing. So
yeah, I liked what Spurrier does here with Jane, and it doesn't make him feel like so much like an anomaly, right? Because I always felt like Irie getting all the speed powers, but he could like get strong, it always felt weird. So I do appreciate that Spurrier found a way to tie him back to the Speed Force, and he interacts with it differently than the rest of the family, and that's kind of what we always had with it. But that he goes around and he can alter it, whereas they're much more passive. He's much more, what's the opposite of passive? Is active? I guess it'd be active, right? He's much more active in the Speed Force than they are, and what that means for him and his dad's relationship is almost like at the end there, he feels like there's almost too much responsibility in what he has and what he does to be a superhero, right? So going back and talking through this and looking at it from that angle is he doesn't want to be a superhero. He wants to be something more, right? Maybe that's a keeper of the Speed Force. Maybe that's, maybe that's a time traveling hero called Inspector Pilgrim, not like his dad. So it definitely gives a different light to that entire conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's got like anything set in mind about what he wants to be, but I think it's just this realization that he can't just be that. Whether that's because he wants to be more normal or something else entirely. We'll see where it goes, but it's definitely an interesting run so far, if nothing else. Like I've always been intrigued when I'm reading it, even if it's not always the smoothest reading experience, because sometimes it's a bit clunky with its dialogue.
I will say that this one wasn't as clunky as some of the others have been. Like this one didn't take me as long to read as some of the other ones have.
I don't think the last one was either. I think these last two were easier to read than the first three.
Yeah. I would agree there, because I think we said the same thing, because the last one was Jesse and Irie, right, going around the Flash girls.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, I really enjoyed that one. I think we said the same thing, that was a lot easier to digest. because he wasn't throwing a million things at us. Here, though, Spurrier does throw a bunch of stuff, but I feel like he articulates it well enough, and the art, the Deodato, it works in balance enough that even though it's a lot of things, it doesn't feel like a lot. So
Yeah,
but yeah, this is definitely a Flash run I won't forget. Now, will I remember the ins and outs exactly? Probably not. But for what he's doing and adding kind of these layers to the character, I definitely won't forget it.
yeah. So, what are you giving the Flash issue 5?
I'm gonna go 7.5.
Yeah, I think I'm happy enough to give it the 8. Even with some faults, like I think the run's growing on me, and hopefully it can keep nudging. It's the sort of thing where I hope by the time it's done, I'll be like, I'll look back at it all and go, you know what, that was kind of special and different, and it'll read even better in a second time when I've already got kind of a feel for it.